They told me not to come to Thanksgiving. Not in so many words, of course, not with anything brave or honest. It came wrapped in the kind of smile you use when you're telling someone to go to hell but want to look polite doing it. My daughter-in-law, Tiffany, opened the door that Wednesday afternoon like she was bracing for a storm. The house behind her was perfect as ever, scented candles burning, placemats already set. She had on that sweater she always wore when she was playing hostess, pearl-colored cashmere, sleeves pushed up like she might lift a finger to help with dinner. She didn't. "What are you doing here, Walter?" she said, standing square in the doorway, arms crossed. I held up the 2 grocery bags I'd been hauling since I got out of the truck. "Thanksgiving prep," I said, like I'd said every year since they moved in. 2 turkeys, sweet potatoes, everything for the stuffing. I figured I'd start brining the birds tonight. Tiffany tilted her head, gave me that pitying little smile. "Yeah, no. This year's a little different." Behind her, I caught a glimpse of Derek, my son, sitting on the edge of the living room ottoman, phone in hand, avoiding eye contact. He didn't even pretend to stand up. Tiffany kept going. "We're doing things our way this year. I've already got a caterer, and my parents are coming. It's just too much with everyone, you know? We need space." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She wasn't finished. "Don't you dare show your face at our Thanksgiving table, you old fool." Just like that. She didn't whisper it. She didn't say it like a joke. It was direct, clipped, loud enough for the neighbor's dog to lift its head. And Derek, my only child, kept his eyes glued to his phone like nothing had happened. So I smiled. "That's all." I set the bags down slowly, nodded once, turned around, and walked back to my truck. By the time the engine warmed up and I'd backed out of their driveway for the last time, I had already made up my mind. No more mortgage payments. No more bills in my name. No more $3,200 a month disappearing from my retirement for a house where I was treated like a roach on the wall. I drove straight to my lawyer's office in Charlotte. Her name's Sharon Bennett. Smart, efficient, no nonsense. She knew the situation. I'd met with her months earlier, just in case this day ever came. We'd prepared everything: the deed, the paper trail, the 60-day notice. It was all sitting in a manila folder waiting for my signature. I signed. Thanksgiving morning, they were still in that house I bought, gathering around a table I paid for, eating food they didn't cook, when the letter from Bennett and Associates arrived. By sunrise the next day, Tiffany was standing on my porch in Lake Norman with her mascara smudged and her hair pulled back like she'd lost sleep. Which, I suspect, she had. Her hand banged hard on my front door like she was trying to knock it off the hinges. "Walter," she yelled. "Open this door. We need to talk. We can work this out." I sipped my coffee and watched from upstairs. She had no idea that the locks had already been changed, the bills cancelled, the insurance transferred. That house was never theirs. They just didn't know it until now. She knocked again, louder this time. Her voice cracked. I didn't move. She'd kicked me out of a house I owned. She'd called me a fool in front of my own son. And now she was standing on my porch, begging me to fix the thing she broke. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Would you have opened that door? Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the new channel, Manly Revenge, because this story is only just getting started. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. We're just warming up. The pounding eventually stopped. She stood there for a few more minutes, arms folded, probably rehearsing another round of accusations or apologies. I couldn't tell which. Then she stormed back to her car and peeled out of my driveway like a teenager with a bruised ego. Silver Lexus, vanity plate that said TFFNYG8. I watched the dust settle over the gravel as silence returned to the lake. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. What I felt was something colder. Like the tension in my back had finally released, but the chill of the damage they'd done was still settling into my bones. Years of swallowing insults, being called old-fashioned or in the way, of having my own son look right through me like I was background noise. All of it had built up to that knock on my door. And I let it go unanswered. By the time I finished my coffee, the sun was high over Lake Norman. I stood on the back deck, looking out over the water, and I realized something. It wasn't just about money. It never had been. It was about control. About who gets to write the narrative. And for years, I'd let Tiffany write mine. She'd painted me as some outdated relic, a man stuck in his ways, lucky to be included in the life they were building. And Derek, God help him, had gone right along with it. At first, I told myself he was just trying to keep the peace. But over time, that peace started to feel a lot like abandonment. So when people asked me why I went as far as I did, why I cut off the money, why I served eviction papers, why I didn't just let it go, I tell them this: you can't unsee what clarity shows you. And when a man sees that the people he loves have decided he's disposable, something inside him changes. That weekend, I started sorting through my records. The mortgage I'd been covering, $2,850 a month, auto-deducted from my checking account like clockwork. The credit card I'd foolishly added Tiffany to as an authorized user, now filled with $8,700 in handbags, travel spas, luxury candles, and something called home staging consulting. That cost $2,400. The utilities? Also in my name. Over the last 4 years, I'd paid out $249,600, not counting the original down payment. That's not generosity. That's exploitation wearing a smile. The legal notice had been delivered, signed for by Derek himself, according to the tracking. But I didn't hear a word from him. Not a text, not a call. Just silence. Like he couldn't find the courage to face what came next. But Tiffany? She kept showing up. Monday morning, I was out in the backyard cutting a piece of cedar for a new crankbait lure when I saw her SUV creeping past the house again. Real slow. Like a cat circling a dog that's finally stood up. She didn't stop. Just looked through the window, then drove on. Tuesday, she tried a different approach. She brought muffins. Store-bought, but warmed in a dish towel like she'd baked them herself. Knocked on the door all sweet and smiley like she hadn't called me a burden and a fool 5 days earlier. "Walter," she said, holding out the basket like it was peace in a pastry. "I just want to talk. This has gotten way out of hand. Derek's upset. I'm upset. We're all just stressed." I didn't take the basket. I didn't open the door. I just watched from the front window as she stood there, turning on every ounce of fake humility she could muster. But I'd seen her real face now. And once you've seen that, no amount of muffins can make you forget. After a few minutes, she walked back to her car, slammed the door, and peeled out of the driveway again. Basket still in hand. Inside, I sat down and reread the eviction timeline. 49 days to go. Sharon Bennett had been precise with the language, professional, respectful, and airtight. If they didn't leave voluntarily, we'd file in court. And the best part? Every word of it was legal. No shouting matches. No drama. Just quiet consequences. That Friday, I drove down to Charlotte, not to the house on Elmwood Drive, but to Sharon's office again. I had an idea. A little clause I wanted added to the documents. When I explained it to her, she leaned back in her chair and raised an eyebrow. "That's cold," she said. I nodded. "Sometimes cold is the only way people learn." She smiled faintly and slid the amended papers across her desk. "I assume you'll want this delivered before Christmas?" "No," I said, tucking the file into my briefcase. "Christmas morning? Let them unwrap that under the tree. Because when someone thinks they can steal your dignity and spend your money doing it, they don't expect you to ever fight back. They expect you to disappear." And I had, but not the way they wanted. They just didn't know it yet. I didn't hear from Derek until 10 days before Christmas. It was a Tuesday morning, fog thick over the lake, and I was out in the garage oiling the hinges on my tackle box when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with his name. Not Tiffany's this time, Derek's. I let it ring twice before answering. Not to punish him. I just needed the space to breathe before I heard his voice. "Dad?" It came out tentative, like he wasn't sure I'd pick up, or maybe he wasn't sure he wanted me to. "I'm here." A pause. Then, "We got the notice." I didn't say anything. I waited. "You're really doing this?" he asked. I could hear something behind the words, something more complicated than anger. Fear, maybe. Shame. "I warned you," I said simply. "You just didn't take me seriously." There was another long silence. Then a sigh that sounded like it had been building for years. "I don't know what to say." "That's a start." His voice cracked just a little. Tiffany told me you were bluffing. That this was just some tantrum, and you'd get over it. Is that what you think too?" "No." He was quiet then. "Not anymore." I leaned against the workbench, the cedar lure I'd been carving still warm in my palm. "You knew whose name was on the deed, Derek. You knew I was the one paying every month. You just chose not to think about it. I didn't know how much." I let out a sharp breath. $249,600. That's how much. Not counting the bags and brunches. His voice broke. "I never asked for that." "No. But you let her ask. And you let her spend. And you watched me carry it all while she insulted me in my own house." There was a shuffling sound on the line, like he'd sat down hard. "I think I lost myself somewhere," he said. "These last few years. I kept telling myself things would get better. That if I just kept the peace, she'd calm down. That you'd understand." I didn't speak. "You were right," he added. "About everything. I didn't want to see it." "You saw it, Derek," I said softer now. "You just didn't want to choose." I thought about my own father then, how he used to say the worst kind of betrayal wasn't when someone turned their back on you. It was when they stood by and let someone else take everything without saying a word. "I don't know what to do," Derek admitted. "She's freaking out. She wants to get a lawyer. She says we can fight the eviction." "You can try. But we'll lose." "Yes," I said. "You will." He was quiet again, and in that quiet, I could hear the weight of it finally landing on him. The truth. The house he thought he was building a life in wasn't his. The comfort he'd grown used to came with a price he never paid. Then came the question I knew was coming. "Is there anything I can do to fix this?" I walked to the window and looked out across the lake, the mist curling low over the water. "Come see me," I said. "But alone. No Tiffany. No scripts." He hesitated. "She won't like that." "I'm not asking what she likes," I said. "I'm asking if you still want a relationship with your father." A beat. "I'll come," he said finally. Tomorrow? I'll be here. He hung up, and I stood there holding the phone for a long time, watching the fog drift and fade. That call had taken 5 years to arrive. 5 years of dinners I wasn't invited to, birthdays I sat out, photos I wasn't in. It wasn't an apology. Not yet. But it was a crack in the wall. The next day, just before noon, Derek pulled into my driveway in his black Audi, the one I hadn't co-signed for, but had definitely helped him bridge, with a $9,000 check 3 years ago. He stepped out, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, shoulders curled inward like he was bracing for a fight. I met him on the porch, coffee in hand. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him. Not just tired, deflated. Like something in him had finally given out. Come on in, I said. We sat at the kitchen table. The same one where he used to do his homework. The same one Tiffany said was too rustic for their taste when I offered to help them furnish their house. I slid a folder across the table. That's everything. Every payment. Every charge. Every dollar you didn't ask about. He opened it. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. He didn't make it to the third before he shut it again. I had no idea, he whispered. I know. She told me we were making it work. That the house was sustainable with her clients and my job. That everything you gave was just a gift. I let out a dry laugh. You know what a gift is? Something you give freely, without being made to feel small for it. That stopped being a gift a long time ago. I'm sorry, he said. I don't know how else to say it. I don't need an apology. I told him. I need you to see the difference between what's real and what's comfortable. He looked up at me then. Really looked. I think I finally do. We sat in silence. Then he asked the hardest question of all. What happens now? You leave the house, I said. You start over. On your own. If you want to keep a relationship with me, it'll be without Tiffany standing over your shoulder. I'm not her problem to solve, and she's not mine to fund. He nodded slowly, like he was hearing the truth in full volume for the first time. And Thanksgiving next year? He asked. I leaned back in my chair, sipping the last of my coffee. We'll see. Because redemption doesn't come in a single conversation. It comes in choices. In who you stand beside when everything starts falling apart. And Derek had just taken his first step. Derek didn't go back to Charlotte right away. He stayed that night in the guest room, same one where his fishing rod still leaned in the corner, untouched since the last time we took the boat out together, 5 years ago, maybe 6. I didn't ask him why he stayed. He didn't volunteer the reason. We both knew. He wasn't ready to face her. Not yet. The next morning, we sat on the back porch with coffee in hand, watching the lake steam under the December sun. Quiet. Still. The kind of morning that makes you remember what peace feels like. She's going to lose it, Derek finally said. I didn't ask who. I didn't have to. She already thinks I betrayed her just by coming here. If I leave, if I actually move out. He didn't finish the sentence. She'll find someone else to bankroll her, I said flatly. Or she'll figure out that those handbags and catered brunches don't come free. He gave me a weak smile. You always saw through her. No, I corrected him. I waited. I waited for you to see through her. Derek winced. But he didn't argue. I had told Sharon Bennett to hold off on filing formal eviction proceedings until after the holidays. Let them spend one last Christmas in that house of lies, I figured. I wasn't cruel, not really. I just wanted them to feel it, the way I had, sitting alone while they threw parties in my name. And besides, I had other things to do. That day, I made a quiet little list. Not of revenge. Of repairs. The dock needed resealing. The basement window was sticking again. The propane tanks were low. Normal things. Human things. For the first time in years, I wasn't too emotionally drained to care about them. Derek helped me replace the batteries in the smoke detectors, patch the drywall in the hallway where humidity had warped the edge. He didn't talk much, but he worked. And I'll tell you, there's something healing about manual labor with someone you've hurt, and who's hurt you, side by side with nothing but tools and the shared weight of regret between you. That evening, over dinner, roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, nothing fancy, he looked up from his plate and said, "I checked our account." I waited. "There's nothing left," he said quietly. 5 years, and we didn't save a single cent. Everything we earned, everything you gave us, it all just disappeared. "No," I said. "It didn't disappear. She spent it. You allowed it." He didn't flinch. "That was new. I'm thinking about moving out," he said. "Getting an apartment. Small. Something I can afford without needing backup." I nodded slowly. That would be a start. He pushed his plate back, leaned his elbows on the table. "She's not going to take it well. She never takes anything well if she's not holding the leash." He looked up at me then. "Do you think there's any way to come back from this?" I didn't answer right away. I stared at the fireplace, the flames low and steady. "That depends on who you mean by we," I said. "You and me? Or you and her?" He didn't reply. But I already knew which one he was asking about. 3 days before Christmas he left. Not with fireworks. No dramatic argument. No overnight bags or police escort. Just a quiet goodbye, a hug on the porch, and the same promise I'd been hoping to hear for years: I'm going to figure out who I am without her. I watched his taillights disappear up the road, then sat on the porch long after they were gone. The wind picked up off the lake. Cold, sharp, but honest. The next morning, I called Sharon Bennett. "Proceed," I told her. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Merry Christmas, Mr. Pierce. Consider it done." That night I lit a fire in the hearth, poured myself a glass of bourbon, and finally did something I hadn't done in years. I smiled. Because real justice, the kind that settles in your bones, isn't loud. It doesn't throw punches or scream in parking lots. It just walks into your life like it belongs there, takes a seat at your table, and waits for everyone else to realize the game has changed. And let me tell you something, friend. The game had changed. Christmas Eve came quiet that year. I didn't decorate. Didn't drag out the old wreath or string lights along the porch rail like I used to when Maria was still with me. No Nat King Cole spinning on the record player. No pumpkin bread rising in the oven. Just the soft crackle of the fire, and the occasional hoot of an owl out past the tree line. At 4:42 p.m., I got a text from Derek. I told her. I moved out. No emojis. No paragraphs. Just that. I read it twice, then poured myself another bourbon and walked out onto the dock, the sky bleeding orange and pink over Lake Norman. He did it. He actually did it. I'd half expected him to fold. I mean, for years he'd let Tiffany run his life like a stage production, down to the clothes he wore, the friends he saw, the things he was allowed to say to me. He'd been trained to flinch at her tone, like a man who learned to live on eggshells and pretend they were clouds. But now he'd stepped out of the play. I stayed out on the dock until the sun disappeared completely. When I came back inside, my house felt different. Not warmer, exactly, but lighter. Like something old had finally been swept out with the tide. I roasted a small pork loin, just enough for one. Ate it with leftover potatoes and half a bottle of wine I'd been saving since before Maria passed. No place to go, no guests to impress, just a quiet Christmas Eve in the sense that, for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. That night, I slept better than I had in a decade. The next morning, Christmas Day, I made my coffee and walked out to the mailbox like I always did. It was cold, breath-fogging cold, but the lake shimmered silver under the morning sun. Inside the box was a plain white envelope. No return address. Inside, a Christmas card. One of those pre-printed ones with a generic snowy cabin and "Peace and Joy" in cursive. No message. Just 2 words written in blue ink. You win. I didn't need a signature. I knew Tiffany's handwriting. And it didn't feel like a win. It felt like confirmation. That all the silence, all the nights alone, all the little humiliations I'd tried to ignore, they'd finally added up to something she couldn't charm, fake, or outmaneuver. I set the card on the kitchen counter and made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, real butter. Then I pulled out my phone and opened Facebook. Not something I do often, but I was curious. Sure enough, there it was. Tiffany's carefully curated Christmas post. Christmas looks different this year, but we're focusing on what matters most: strength, growth, and letting go of what no longer serves us. No Derek in the photo. Just her, posed in front of her parents' fireplace, wine glass in hand, eyes glassy but defiant. She still didn't get it. She thought this was about a falling out. A bad argument. Some misunderstanding that time and wine and curated Instagram captions could smooth over. But this wasn't about a single holiday. This was about years. Years of watching her peel my son away from me, one decision at a time. Years of bankrolling their lifestyle while she pretended I didn't exist. Years of being told I was lucky to be tolerated at my own family's table. And now? Now she was learning what life looked like without my wallet, without my silence, and without my son. Because Derek was gone. Really gone. And Tiffany, for all her manipulation, couldn't patch that hole with throw pillows and seasonal mantras. Around noon, Derek called. "Merry Christmas, Dad." "Merry Christmas, son. How's the new place?" "Small," he said, "but peaceful. I made breakfast for myself this morning." "You burn anything?" He laughed. "Only the toast. And maybe the bacon." "Then you're doing fine." We talked for a while. Nothing heavy. Just normal things. Plans for New Year's. Whether the fishing boat would need a new battery come spring. He asked about Mom's old recipes, if I still had that binder she used to keep above the fridge. "Yeah," I said. "It's in the pantry." "You want a copy?" "I think I do," he said. "I think I want to start making some things that feel like home." There was a pause. Not Tiffany's version of home. Ours. That hit me harder than anything else had. Not the eviction. Not the legal back and forth. Not even the insults. That. Because after everything, after 5 years of slow erosion, I was finally hearing my son talk like a man again. Like someone who remembered where he came from and had stopped apologizing for it. I told him I'd scan the recipes this week. He said he'd come by after the holidays to pick them up in person. Just him. No cameras. No script. No Tiffany. I ended the call and stared out the window for a long time. My house was still empty. But I didn't feel alone. Not this time. New Year's Eve rolled in with a drizzle, soft and cold, the kind of rain that made the whole lake look like it had been brushed with smoke. I didn't have plans. Didn't want any. I sat on the back porch with a mug of black coffee and an old quilt Maria had made before the arthritis took her hands. It still smelled faintly like cedar and lavender. I kept it close. At 11:43 p.m., my phone buzzed. One message. Derek. Not going to any parties. Just made grilled cheese and soup. First New Year's alone. Feels weird. I thought for a second. Then typed back. Me. Better weird and honest than loud and fake. 3 little dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then came back. Derek. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. The fireworks from across the lake started around midnight. Just a few. Then more. Small bursts of light in the fog, like the sky was trying to remember how to celebrate. I didn't go outside. I stayed in my chair, watched through the screen door, and let the sound wash over me. This year, there were no toasts, no forced smiles, no pretending that everything was fine while Tiffany sipped champagne and bragged about her perfect life to people who couldn't see through the gloss. This year, I entered the new year clean. The next morning, I did something symbolic. Doesn't matter to anyone else, but it mattered to me. I took down the framed picture that hung in my hallway, the one Tiffany had given me our first Christmas after the wedding. It was a black and white photo of the Charlotte skyline, framed in that minimalist, cold style she always liked. She said it would make the place feel more modern. What it actually did was erase every trace of Maria, of warmth, of us. So I took it down, walked it straight to the fire pit in the backyard, and tossed it in. Watched the glass crack in the heat, the frame blacken, the skyline curl inward on itself. Then I went back inside and hung up an old photo of me and Derek on the lake, holding up a fish he caught when he was 8. His hair was too long, his smile too wide. Maria had taken it. I remember that day clear as glass. Before everything got complicated. Before he forgot who he was. Maybe he was remembering now. 2 days later, I got a certified letter in the mail from Tiffany's attorney. It was a predictable mix of threats and desperation. This eviction is retaliatory. Significant emotional distress to my client. We demand an immediate reversal, or we will pursue damages. I took it straight to Sharon Bennett's office and handed it over without a word. She flipped through it, her red pen already in hand. This is sloppy, she said. Not even citing precedent. Just noise. Can they fight it? They can try, she said. But they'll lose. Sharon had that same glint in her eye she had when we first met. She didn't just enjoy winning, she enjoyed dismantling arrogance with facts. That's why I hired her. I'll handle the response, she added. They'll get it by week's end. Good. On the way home, I drove past Elmwood Drive. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see it with new eyes. The house still looked perfect. The shrubs trimmed into neat little domes, the porch swept clean, the shutters that Tiffany insisted on having painted, eggshell blue, now slightly weathered from the winter rain. But for the first time, I saw it for what it was, not a home, not anymore. Just a structure waiting to be emptied. 2 cars sat in the driveway, but the lights were off. Curtains drawn. Probably licking their wounds, huddled in the living room Tiffany had once called her entertainment sanctuary. A sanctuary I had paid for. A week later, Sharon called. She's not fighting it. At least, not legally. Her lawyer dropped the case. Why? Probably after reading the lease documents, the deed, the bank transfers, and the part where she admitted on video that the house was yours. I'm guessing he decided she wasn't worth the retainer. I laughed for the first time in days. And it wasn't the sharp kind of laugh I'd gotten used to, the bitter chuckle you let out when something's so wrong it almost circles back to funny. No, this was different. It was relief. They have 30 days left, Sharon reminded me. Still no official move-out notice, but I'd expect something soon. She's not the type to stick around when the lights get cut. No, I said. She'll try to spin it. Probably tell her friends she's downsizing to simplify her life. Sharon smirked. Let her. That evening, I sent Derek a text. When the house is empty, I'd like you to walk through it with me. One last time. He replied within seconds. I want that too. The wheels were turning now. Quiet, slow, and unstoppable. Tiffany had played her hand. And lost. And in just a few more weeks she'd be boxed up and gone. But me? I'd still be standing. And I wouldn't be standing alone. The first sign came on a Thursday afternoon, a moving truck parked crooked in front of 1847 Elmwood Drive. Not a big corporate truck. Just a rented box van, engine idling, hazard lights blinking like a warning. I drove by slow, eyes steady on the rearview mirror. Tiffany stood on the porch, phone pressed to her ear, barking orders. A man in a hoodie hauled out boxes labeled kitchen and books, stacked them without care. I saw one tumble sideways. She didn't even glance. The performance was over. The house she once treated like her throne had become something else entirely, a sinking ship, and she was finally jumping. The next morning, I called Derek. She's moving? He asked. She's packing. Close enough. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, you still want to do the walk-through? Only if you do. He took a breath. Yeah. I do. We met there 3 days later, just after sunrise. The air was cold and clear, the kind of morning where everything feels sharper, edges, memories, regrets. Derek pulled up first. No Tiffany. No pretense. He looked tired but different now. Less hollow. More solid, like something had started to rebuild in his bones. We didn't say much at first. Just nodded, walked up the familiar steps, and let ourselves in with my key. The house was quiet. Empty. Still smelled faintly like vanilla and that overpriced diffuser Tiffany swore made the place feel like Tuscany. But the echo was new. We moved room to room like ghosts. The living room where I once stood holding grocery bags while she told me not to ruin her holiday vibe. The kitchen where I'd cooked 3 Thanksgiving dinners she took credit for. The upstairs hallway where my grandson, if I'd ever been blessed with one, might have someday run barefoot and laughing. Instead, all I had was silence. Do you want to keep the place? Derek asked, voice low. I looked around. The hardwood floors were scuffed. The baseboards needed cleaning. The walls, Tiffany's precious gray tones, already felt like they belonged to someone else. No, I said. I want to sell it. He nodded. Good. We made a few notes: loose cabinet door, patch in the drywall, gutters that needed clearing. Normal things. But what struck me most wasn't what the house lacked. It was what it had never really been. A home. It was always a set piece for someone else's fantasy. A backdrop for curated perfection. And I had paid for every inch of it. In the garage, stacked near the side door, sat the last few boxes Tiffany hadn't yet loaded. I recognized the handwriting on one. Christmas decor. I stared at it for a moment, then turned to Derek. She's leaving the ornaments? He gave a short laugh. She said they wouldn't match her new place. Of course they wouldn't. Her new life wouldn't have room for anything old, anything genuine. Just aesthetics. Just reinvention. We locked the house behind us. Derek paused on the porch, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. I was wrong, he said quietly. I know. I let her turn me into someone I didn't even recognize. I didn't say anything. He looked at me then. But I'm not that man anymore. I held his gaze. Then don't be. We stood in the driveway a while longer, letting the moment settle. Letting the weight of it all drift away, little by little. Lunch at the lake? I asked. He smiled. If you're buying. I always did. He laughed, the sound of it lighter than it used to be. As we drove back toward Lake Norman, I watched the trees blur past and felt a quiet sense of something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Not justice. Not even peace. Something better. A beginning. And as for Tiffany? Her ending was just beginning too. 3 days later, the house was empty. I got the final confirmation from Sharon Bennett. Tiffany had officially vacated the property on January 27th, 2 days before the deadline. No fight. No appeal. No last-minute legal maneuver. Just silence. I went over the next morning to do one final check before listing it. Brought a notepad and a thermos of black coffee. Winter sun pouring through the bare windows, dust motes floating in beams of light like suspended ash. Every room echoed. In the living room, a single wine glass sat abandoned on the windowsill. Smudged lipstick on the rim. Probably forgotten in the chaos of packing. Or maybe left as a message. Either way, it went in the trash. The bedrooms were stripped. Closets bare. One of them still had a command hook stuck to the wall with a string of fake pearls dangling from it. I yanked it down, tossed it in a black bag, and tied it tight. The kitchen looked untouched. Spotless. Too clean. That's how you know someone's trying to erase the past. They don't clean to be courteous. They clean like they're scrubbing out the memory of you. By the time I locked the front door, it didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a showroom. All it needed now was a price tag. I listed it through Sharon's referral, a woman named Judy with a real estate firm in Charlotte. Within 48 hours, we had 3 offers. All above asking. The market was hot. And unlike the last time I'd handed this house over, this time I'd be the one getting paid. We closed in under 3 weeks. $612,000. After fees and taxes, I walked away with just over $500,000. Cash in hand. That's what Tiffany gave up. That's what she lost by playing the long game like it was short-term theater. All those years pretending I was a prop in her lifestyle. All the dinners I wasn't invited to. The bills I was expected to pay without complaint. The holidays I spent alone. She traded all of it, for nothing. No house. No husband. No narrative left to spin. As for Derek, he was holding steady. Found a 2-bedroom condo near South End, modest but clean, with a kitchen big enough to cook and a couch big enough to fall asleep on during movie nights. He invited me over the week after closing. Nothing fancy, he said. But it's mine. We ordered pizza. Watched an old western. Talked for hours, about Mom, about growing up, about mistakes. No Tiffany. Her name never came up. Not once. That told me everything I needed to know. He was done. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Later that night, curiosity got the better of me, and I played it. Tiffany. Of course. Her voice was hollow. Flat. Walter. I know you think you've won. And maybe you have. But I want you to know that you destroyed something. Not just the house. Not just our life. You poisoned him. You made him ashamed of everything we built. She paused. I hope you're happy. That was it. No apology. No admission. Just projection. I deleted the message. Didn't even flinch. She still didn't understand that what they built was never real. It was an illusion made out of my money, my silence, and her performance. The second I withdrew one of those things, the whole thing crumbled. It wasn't sabotage. It was gravity. And as for being happy? Not quite. Not yet. But peace was close. Close enough that I could feel it in the mornings when I sat on the dock with a cup of coffee, and the lake still as glass. Close enough that I could hear it in Derek's voice when he called just to talk, no agenda, no crisis. Close enough that when I looked at the calendar and saw February creeping in, I didn't dread the months ahead. I welcomed them. Because in the ashes of what they tried to take from me, I found something better. My footing. And soon, I'd find something else too. But I'll get to that. Because just when I thought the story was over, another door opened. It started with a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A real letter, envelope, stamp, hand addressed in neat cursive I didn't recognize. Postmarked from Raleigh. I opened it standing over the kitchen sink, crumbs from my toast still on the counter. Inside was a single sheet of ivory stationery, folded in thirds. The kind used by women who iron their sheets and still write in pen. The handwriting was firm. Graceful. Confident. Dear Mr. Pierce. You don't know me, but I know of you. My name is Eloise Harmon. I'm Tiffany's aunt. Gretchen's younger sister, though you wouldn't know that by the way she talks about me. I've watched from the sidelines for years as Tiffany climbed her little social ladder, and I stayed quiet longer than I should have. But after everything that's happened, what you endured, what she's done to Derek, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I just wanted to say, I believe you. And more than that, I admire you. I stopped reading. Let the words settle like dust. Then I kept going. We may never meet, but I felt you deserved to know that not everyone in that family shares Gretchen's values, or Tiffany's vanity. Some of us remember what integrity looks like. And watching you reclaim yours gave me more satisfaction than I can say. If you're ever in Raleigh, I'd like to buy you coffee. No pressure. Just conversation. From one weary truth-teller to another. Warmly, Eloise Harmon. I read the letter again. Then again. Each time slower. Something in the tone got to me. Not flattery. Not pity. But clarity. She sounded like someone who'd seen the same kind of rot I had, just from the other side of the banquet table. I didn't know what to do with it at first. I tucked the letter in my desk drawer. Sat with it for a week. Took it out. Read it again. On the 8th day, I wrote back. Dear Ms. Harmon. Thank you. Your letter was unexpected, but appreciated more than you know. I've met a lot of people in my life who hide behind manners and status. But truth doesn't need decoration. It shows up plain. And you did. I'll be in Raleigh next month for a doctor's appointment. If the offer still stands, I'd take you up on that coffee. No expectations. Just honesty. Yours, Walter Pierce. I mailed it the same day. Didn't tell Derek. Didn't need to. Some things are for sharing. Others are for rediscovering what kind of man you still are when the noise dies down. The following weeks passed without incident. Derek settled into his new place, found a rhythm. He'd call once or twice a week, just to chat. Asked about how I made that pecan glazed ham Mom used to love. Wanted to know if I had a good second-hand shop for furniture recommendations. Little things. Normal things. It wasn't the past. But it was something honest. Something steady. Tiffany, for her part, disappeared from view. No new Facebook posts. No Instagram stories of her curated life. Like a snake shedding its skin, she'd slithered out of town and back under her mother's roof in Raleigh. The house on Elmwood sold quickly. Full price, cash buyer. I never told the new owners the history. They didn't ask. All they wanted was a backyard big enough for their dog and a quiet neighborhood with good schools. They didn't care who used to live there, or what ghosts still lingered in the corners. Good. Let the past fade with new paint. By the first week of March, I'd cleaned out my safe. All the paperwork, the copies of statements, the old legal letters, gone. Shredded, burned, or boxed up for the attic. I kept one thing, the deed, now stamped with "Satisfied" in big red letters. Proof of a storm weathered. A battle won. That was the week Derek came by unannounced. I opened the front door and found him holding a small cardboard box, grinning sheepishly. "What's that?" He held it out. "Some of Mom's old photo albums. I found them tucked in a bin behind the water heater. Thought you might want to look through them with me." We sat for hours at the kitchen table, flipping through pages. There was my wife, young and barefoot, in the garden. There was Derek, 2 years old, face smeared with cake. Me in a tie that should have been illegal. We laughed. Fell quiet. Laughed again. At one point Derek looked up and said, "Thank you?" "For what?" "For not giving up on me." I didn't reply. Just reached over, squeezed his arm, and turned the page. The last photo in the album was one I hadn't seen in years. Maria holding Derek's hand at his high school graduation, and me standing behind them with my hands on both their shoulders. 3 people, frozen in a moment that didn't know what was coming. But now, after all this time, the photo didn't ache the way it used to. It reminded me of who we were. And who, maybe, we could still become. I met Eloise Harmon on a Tuesday. Early April, just after Easter. The dogwoods were in bloom along the Raleigh sidewalks, scattering pale pink petals across windshield glass and sewer grates. I parked across from a quiet cafe on Glenwood Avenue. No reservations needed, no valet, no smug brunch crowd. Just a hand-painted sign that said "Coffee and honesty served here." I smiled. Good omen. I'd never seen her in person. But I didn't need to guess when she stepped through the door. Eloise looked like someone who had once walked away from a life that wasn't hers and never looked back. Black coat, long silver hair pinned up, wire-framed glasses that made her look just as sharp as she sounded in her letter. She spotted me before I stood. "Mr. Pierce?" she said, extending her hand. "Walter, please," I replied, standing and taking it. Her grip was firm. No hesitation. "Then Eloise," she smiled. "No titles between truth-tellers." We ordered coffee. Straight black for me. Earl Grey for her, with a splash of cream. Sat at a table by the window with a view of people walking dogs, carrying groceries, living lives that didn't require eviction notices or character assassinations. She didn't waste time. "My sister raised Tiffany with a diamond-cut sense of entitlement," she said, stirring her tea without looking at it. "She believed charm was currency and status was inheritance. I stepped back when I saw how that child turned out. Felt like I was the one out of step." "You weren't," I said. She nodded. "I know that now." We talked for over an hour. About Derek. About Tiffany. About how people convince themselves they deserve whatever they can take, as long as they call it ambition. She told me about the last time she spoke to Gretchen, Thanksgiving Day, no less, when her sister called her antiquated for suggesting Derek's father deserved a place at the holiday table. She doesn't believe in humility, Eloise said. She believes in optics. And you, Walter, were never the picture she wanted in the frame. I sipped my coffee. She got her wish. Now I'm not in the house either. Eloise leaned in. Yes, but unlike her, you walked out standing. That line stuck with me. She asked about the lake, about fishing, about whether I'd ever considered writing a book. I laughed. Only thing I write down these days is lure sizes and grocery lists. Maybe start with that, she said. The rest comes easier than you think. Before we left, she reached into her bag and handed me another envelope. This one thinner, sealed with wax. Don't open it now, she said. Later. At home. After dinner. When the house is quiet. I nodded. We stood together at the curb. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Respect, maybe. Or understanding. Or both. However you thought this would end, she said gently, I hope you realize it's only just beginning. Then she was gone. No long goodbye, no suggestion of another meeting. Just a brief touch on my arm, and a nod as she stepped into a cab. I drove home that night with the envelope still on the passenger seat. Didn't open it when I got home. Didn't touch it while I reheated leftovers and watched the news and folded a load of laundry that had been waiting since Sunday. I waited until everything was dark. Then I sat at the kitchen table, same spot where Maria used to drink her tea, and broke the wax. Inside was a handwritten note and a black and white photo. The note said, This was taken in 1981. Your wife and I met once. At a church dinner. She brought a peach pie and refused to accept a single compliment without crediting her grandmother. She was radiant. I wanted you to know that the people she touched never forgot her. I stared at the photo. Maria, younger than I ever saw her, laughing with a group of women in folding chairs under a striped tent. There was something in her eyes, alive, soft, unguarded, that hit me like a wind I hadn't felt in years. I hadn't expected that. Not from a stranger. But Eloise wasn't a stranger anymore. She was something else. That night, I slept with the photo on my nightstand. And for the first time since Maria passed, I dreamed in color again. I woke the next morning with a clear head and something unfamiliar, a feeling I couldn't name at first. Not joy. Not relief. Something quieter. Closure. I left the photo on the nightstand and went about my day. Pulled weeds along the stone path by the dock. Replaced the broken hinge on the shed door. Ate lunch standing up in the kitchen, leftover chicken, a couple slices of pear. Life, as it turns out, doesn't wait for clean endings. It keeps moving. You either move with it, or you rot in place. Around 3 o'clock, Derek called. Dad, he said, tone lighter than usual. Got a question for you. Shoot. You doing anything Sunday? Depends. Am I about to regret saying no? He laughed. I want to cook dinner. For you. I blinked. You. I've been practicing. Borrowed a Dutch oven from the neighbor. Got a pork shoulder marinating in the fridge. I sat down at the table, smiling without meaning to. You sure about this? That's a bold move. I figure I've got a few decades of meals to make up for. Might as well start somewhere. Sunday it is, I said. I'll bring a bottle of something good. No, he said, and for a second I heard that confidence in his voice again. Let me cover it. All of it. All right then. He paused. It matters, you know. Doing this right. I know. I hung up and stared out the window for a while, watching wind stir the water in little ripples. Maria would have liked that phone call. Would have said, let him try. Let him feed you for once. That Sunday, I drove to Derek's condo with a small bag under my arm, a few things I thought he might want. Old cast iron skillet. Mom's handwritten cornbread recipe. A good knife he always liked borrowing when he visited, back when visits were still a thing. His condo was modest. Clean. Quiet. There was no smell of candles or designer perfumes. Just pork and onions and something earthy, bay leaves, maybe. The scent of effort. Of someone trying, not to impress, but to reconnect. You really did all this yourself? I asked, stepping into the kitchen. Cross my heart. He grinned, wiping his hands on a dish towel. It might be terrible. But it's mine. It wasn't terrible. It was a little salty. The potatoes were slightly underdone. But it was made with both hands and a beating heart. That made it better than any meal I'd eaten in that expensive house on Elmwood Drive. We ate at his small table by the window, sunlight slanting through blinds, casting long shadows on the wood floor. He poured the wine. Served the food. And for a full hour, we just talked. About fishing season. About an old movie we both loved. About the way grief lingers, but eventually learns to wait its turn. At the end of the meal, Derek pushed a small envelope across the table. What's this? I asked. He looked nervous. Just open it. Inside was a check. Made out to me. Amount, $5,000. I know it's nothing compared to what I owe, he said quickly. I'll never be able to pay you back for everything. But I'm going to try. Bit by bit. I stared at the check, heart caught somewhere between pride and sorrow. You don't have to do this, I said. I know, he replied. But I need to. He wasn't doing it for me. Not really. He was doing it for himself, for the version of him that had been buried under Tiffany's expectations and silence. He was digging himself out, one shovel of dignity at a time. I folded the check and tucked it in my coat pocket. You keep doing this, I told him, and maybe one day you won't owe me anything at all. He nodded, and for a moment neither of us said a word. We didn't need to. That night, I drove home with the windows down, the spring air brushing against my face like a blessing. The old pain still lived in me. Of course it did. But it no longer held the deed to my house. No longer controlled the locks. No longer had the final say. Derek was healing. I was healing. And Tiffany? Well, Tiffany was learning what it meant to be cut off. And not just from money, but from meaning. By late April, the gossip had caught up to her. It always does, eventually. I didn't go looking for it. Wouldn't have known if it weren't for Nancy Coleman, my neighbor up at the lake. She knocked on my screen door one Saturday morning, holding a paper grocery bag and a raised eyebrow. You didn't hear this from me, she said, handing over a fresh loaf of zucchini bread like it was a bribe. Hear what? She pulled out her phone and opened Facebook. Tapped twice. Turned the screen to me. There it was, the Greater Charlotte Social Scene Group. 12,000 members strong. A place for restaurant recommendations, PTA fundraising complaints, and when things get interesting, the fall of self-proclaimed queens. Someone had posted a screenshot of Tiffany's old profile bio. Interior design curator. Lifestyle consultant. Connector of people. Then below it, a new comment chain that started innocently enough. Does anyone know what happened to Tiffany Pierce? She was supposed to speak at our brunch last month but just disappeared. The replies came quickly. She and Derek split, didn't they? My cousin worked with her once, says she never paid on time. I heard she lost the house. Something about her FIL evicting her? Crazy story. It unraveled from there. Snide remarks disguised as sympathy. Screenshots of old posts Tiffany had since deleted, bragging about her hard-earned success and blessed marriage. One woman claimed she was trying to rebrand under a new name in Raleigh, but no one was buying it. I handed Nancy her phone back. I don't want to read that, I said. She nodded. I figured. But I thought you should know. I walked the loaf inside, still warm, and set it on the kitchen counter. The whole thing left a strange taste in my mouth, not satisfaction, not regret. Just weariness. I didn't hate Tiffany. That's the truth. You think you'll want revenge to taste like victory, but most of the time, it just tastes like relief. A low flame going out. The sigh after the scream. A few days later, I saw her. By accident. I was in Raleigh for another checkup, just routine, and stopped at a small bookstore downtown. One of those cozy places with creaky floors and handwritten shelf labels. I was flipping through a used copy of The Old Man and the Sea when I heard her voice behind me. Low. Distracted. I'm sorry, I'm looking for something with color, not just beige. I'm sick of beige. I turned. She was standing by the art and design section, talking to the clerk. Hair pulled back in a messy knot. No makeup. Oversized sweater, old boots. She looked real. Unpolished. Smaller. She hadn't seen me. I stayed where I was, half hidden behind the Hemingway, watching as she picked up a coffee table book and flipped it open, eyes darting across pages like she was somewhere else entirely. Then she looked up, sensing something. Our eyes met. She froze. I gave a small nod. Nothing more. She opened her mouth, maybe to speak, maybe to scoff, but nothing came out. She shut the book and walked past me without a word, her boots tapping hard against the floorboards. Gone. I didn't follow. Didn't need to. Somewhere in her walk, I recognized it. That stiff posture, the forced chin lift, the quiet calculation behind the eyes. She was still performing. Just for a different audience now. That night, I sat on the back deck with a bourbon in one hand and the book in the other. Hemingway had a line that hit harder than I expected. But man is not made for defeat. A man can be destroyed but not defeated. I closed the book and stared at the lake, calm and dark and endless. I'd been destroyed once. Grief. Silence. Betrayal. But I wasn't defeated. And now? I had my son. I had my home. I had the space to breathe again. That's the part they never understand, the ones who think money is the only kind of wealth. They never see how powerful it is to be left alone. To choose who you let in. I poured the last sip of bourbon and raised my glass to the stars. She could keep her rebrand. I had reclaimed something she never valued. My peace. May settled in soft and green, like a forgiveness you didn't ask for but got anyway. Derek came up to the lake most weekends now. We didn't schedule it. He'd just show up, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with a six-pack and a tired smile. He started helping with the dock repairs, asking about how to patch siding, how to split wood without bruising the grain. We didn't talk about Tiffany much anymore. Not because we were avoiding it, but because it wasn't relevant. She'd become background noise, a distant storm long past, the kind you remember only by the way it changed the shape of the trees. One Saturday morning, he brought up something unexpected. I talked to a guy, he said, sitting on the porch steps while I cleaned out the bait bucket. What kind of guy? Broker, he said. I'm thinking about starting something. A small thing. Real estate consulting. Nothing big. I looked over at him. You want to sell houses? No, he said. I want to help people keep them. Avoid foreclosure. I know it sounds dumb. It doesn't, I said, standing. It sounds like someone who learned what drowning feels like and doesn't want anyone else to go under. He exhaled, like I'd released a pressure valve in his chest. Is that weird? He asked. To take something that broke me and turn it into something useful? No, I said. That's survival. He looked down at his hands. I just keep thinking, if someone had stepped in for you sooner, if I had, you wouldn't have had to go through all that alone. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I had to go through it to finally step out of it. He nodded. We sat in silence for a while, watching the wind ripple across the lake in long, soft folds. That afternoon, I helped him build a small desk for his condo, something sturdy, real wood, no nonsense. We carved the initials W.P. on the underside. Not for credit. Just a signature. A reminder. That night, after he left, I pulled out an old storage bin from the basement. Maria's things. Her letters. Some old Polaroids. A shoebox full of greeting cards and ticket stubs. I hadn't touched it in years. But now I was ready. I sat on the floor, cross-legged like a man half my age, and opened the box. Inside was a note she'd written to Derek the night before his first day of college. I remembered it now. She tucked it into his suitcase without telling him. You'll hear a lot of voices in your life, son. Some will tell you to rise, some will tell you to shrink. Learn the sound of your own voice. That's the one that knows the way home. I closed my eyes. She'd always been better at finding the words. And now, after everything, after the silence, the manipulation, the 1,000 tiny humiliations, our son was finally hearing his own voice again. And it was his, not hers. A few days later, Sharon Bennett called. You'll like this one, she said, sounding amused. Let's hear it. Tiffany reached out. Not to you. To the buyer who purchased Elmwood. I raised an eyebrow. Why? She offered to consult on their interior design. Said she had deep personal knowledge of the home's character and potential. I laughed. Actually laughed. You're joking. I wish I were. Buyer declined. Politely. Then forwarded me the email. She used her old name. Still trying to operate under the Pierce Lifestyle Interiors brand. Even after the divorce? Seems like she's hoping no one checks the paperwork. I shook my head. She always did treat the truth like a throw pillow, move it around, fluff it up, toss it out when it didn't match. Sharon chuckled. That may be the best line I've heard all month. After we hung up, I sat on the back porch and watched the sun dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the water. The dock creaked. The air smelled like honeysuckle and pine. Real things. Simple things. Tiffany's last grasp at relevance didn't sting. It didn't even register as a threat. It was just one more performance, played for an empty room. She was fading. And not because I pushed her out. But because the spotlight had shifted, and this time, it wasn't pointed at her. It was on my son. It was on the truth. And it was steady. June brought heat, but not the kind that bothers you. The kind that loosens your shoulders, slows your breath, makes the lake shimmer like a secret being kept just for you. I'd gotten used to peace. Not the kind you buy with candles or meditation or inspirational quotes, but the kind that creeps in when nobody's demanding a piece of you. When no one's asking for a check under the table or a favor wrapped in guilt. The kind that comes after the storm breaks every piece of furniture in your life and you're finally left alone to build again. This time, without the noise. Derek came by one morning with an envelope in hand. I was outside reading the rope swing, sweat already soaking through my shirt. "More bills?" I asked, smirking. He shook his head. "Actually, something else." He handed it to me. Inside was a printed proposal, 5 pages, neatly formatted, with a logo at the top, Second Wind Consulting. "I registered the business last week," he said. "Filed the paperwork. Got the website up too. I wanted you to see it before I made it public." I flipped through the pages. It was clean. Clear. Focused on foreclosure prevention, small budget financial planning, and property management for middle-income homeowners. "You planning to go solo?" I asked. He shifted his weight, suddenly nervous. "Not exactly. I've been talking to 2 guys from my old office. We'd split clients. I'd handle the one-on-one stuff. They'd help with logistics." He paused, then added, "But it was your story that gave me the idea. I'm calling the first package the Elmwood Plan." I looked up at him. He gave a shy smile. I figured I owed that house something. I didn't say anything right away. Just nodded. Folded the proposal. Slipped it back into the envelope. "I'm proud of you," I said. He looked like he might cry for half a second, then cleared his throat and went back to tying the other side of the rope swing. That afternoon, we grilled on the back porch. Simple stuff. Burgers, corn, cold beer. The kind of meal you don't take pictures of because you're too busy enjoying it. Around sunset, Derek sat back in his chair and said, "Do you think people can really change? I mean, like deep down?" I stared out at the lake. A family of ducks passed by, single file, barely causing a ripple. "I think some people do," I said. "When they lose enough. When they look at what's left and don't recognize themselves." "And the ones who don't? They try to reinvent their image instead of their soul." He nodded. "Tiffany's trying to get back into social circles. Saw her pop up on LinkedIn last week. Same bio. Same photo. New city. You worried she'll drag you back into her orbit?" "No," he said. "That line's been cut." Then he looked at me. Really looked at me. "You ever miss the version of her that I first brought home?" That caught me off guard. I thought about it. "I miss who I thought she was," I said finally. "But that wasn't her. That was just a good performance. The real person showed up soon enough. You just weren't ready to see her." He nodded. "Neither was I." We sat a while longer. Mosquitoes started dancing in the air, and I lit a citronella candle Maria had tucked away in the basement years ago. Still worked. Before he left that night, Derek pulled something from his truck. A small framed picture. Me, him, and Maria on the porch, probably 20 years ago. Maria's hand on Derek's shoulder, mine holding a mug, half laughing. "I want this in my office," he said. "A reminder of what home really looks like." I took it, brushed a bit of dust from the glass, and handed it back. "She'd be proud of you," I said. "Are you?" he asked. "I've never stopped." He drove away just before dark, taillights disappearing into the trees. I stood at the end of the drive for a while, the air thick with cicadas and summer, and the weight of everything we'd come through. That night, I opened the back door and stood barefoot on the porch, listening to the water. I thought about how far we'd come. From silence. From debt. From the kind of manipulation that eats your self-worth like termites in the foundation. And here we were. Free. And building something honest, one plank at a time. Mid-July brought storms. Not the metaphorical kind, real ones. Thick, southern skies split open over Lake Norman for 3 days straight. Thunder cracked like judgment. Rain turned the earth to mud and the dock to a slick death trap. I stayed inside, windows cracked for the breeze, ceiling fans humming like distant applause. That Friday, Derek called just after lunch. "You hear the news?" he asked. "Depends. Is it about the heat wave, the stock market, or the latest reason people can't stand their in-laws?" He let out a short laugh. "Tiffany filed a civil claim." I went still. "Against me?" "No. Against the buyers of the Elmwood house." That surprised me. "On what grounds?" "She claims they violated a verbal agreement she made with them before closing. Says she was promised a chance to buy back the furniture they inherited." I shook my head. "She left the furniture. She said it didn't fit her next chapter." "I know. Sharon knows. The buyers know. But Tiffany's treating the legal system like it's Instagram, just another platform for her story." I walked to the kitchen window, stared out at the dripping magnolia tree in the backyard. "She doesn't want the furniture," I said. "She wants to be relevant." Derek paused. "Do you think she's unraveling?" I thought about that. "No," I said. "I think she's flailing. There's a difference. Unraveling is quiet. Private. Flailing is loud, messy, and always aimed at someone else." "She called my office last week," he said, voice low. "That got my attention." "What did she want?" "To talk. About the past. About how we were a brand, not a marriage. Said we owed it to each other to protect our image." I leaned against the counter. "You tell her that brand's bankrupt?" He let out a slow exhale. "Yeah. I did. I didn't ask what else she said. I didn't need to." By now I understood something that used to elude me. When a person builds their identity on borrowed grace and inherited charm, they will always chase the next person who can carry their weight. I had been that person once. Not anymore. That weekend, Derek came by again. This time with a folder of business cards and brochures. Second Wind was officially live. "I've got 5 clients," he said proudly. "Mostly referrals. People on the edge of foreclosure who just need someone to walk them through the options." "You like the work?" "I love it," he said. "It's the first thing I've done that feels like it means something." We sat on the porch. No grill this time. Just sweet tea, cold from the fridge, and the kind of conversation that doesn't need to go anywhere. I don't know what to say to people when they ask about the last few years, Derek admitted. About what happened. "You don't owe them a speech," I said. "You lived it. That's enough." He nodded. "But if you want something short," I added, "try this." I stopped confusing being needed with being respected. He was quiet for a long time. "That's it," he said. "That's exactly it." The clouds broke that night just before dusk. A salmon-colored sky spread over the lake like a second chance. Wind moved through the trees in the windows like a promise being kept. Derek stood to leave. As he walked to his truck, he paused and turned. "Dad?" "Yeah? I know I've said it already, but—" "Derek," I cut in. "Stop trying to earn something that was always yours. You're my son. I didn't stop loving you. I just stopped financing your silence." He swallowed hard. "That's fair. We didn't hug. We're not that kind of family. But the space between us didn't feel distant anymore. It felt full. Like something had finally grown there. Something rooted. After he left, I pulled out my old tackle box. The one he used to dig through as a boy, fascinated by the crankbaits and soft plastics and lures with silly names. I started cleaning it. Because for the first time in a long while, I had a feeling. We'd be fishing again. August brought stillness. That deep, southern hush that comes after the cicadas burn out and the lake breathes slow again. Even the storms had stopped barking. Just the sky stretched wide and blue over everything I still owned, still loved, still protected. And maybe, for the first time in years, there wasn't a fire to put out. I spent mornings on the dock, casting lines, catching nothing. That wasn't the point. Afternoons, I tinkered in the shed, restoring old lures Derek used to favor when he was 12. I kept one of them, chipped paint, rusty hook, on a nail above the workbench like a trophy. One Thursday morning, I got a call from Sharon Bennett. "She's gone," she said. "Where?" "California." I blinked. "You serious?" "She filed a formal change of address last week. I confirmed it through the legal channels. Marina del Rey. Apartment rental. Under a different name." That caught me. "What name?" "T.J. Harmon. First name initials, mother's maiden name." I let out a long breath, somewhere between a laugh and a curse. "She's rebuilding the brand." Sharon paused. "And distancing from the fallout." We both knew what that meant. Reinventing herself, as always. Shifting context. Changing names. Hoping no one connected her to the unraveling in Charlotte or the eviction in Myers Park or the perfectly timed social collapse that started with a Thanksgiving insult and ended with a man, me, finally saying, "Enough." "Should I be worried?" I asked. "Legally? No. You're clear. She signed the final release of claim when you sold the house. But emotionally?" Sharon hesitated. "Let's just say I've seen people like her before. She's not chasing accountability. She's chasing narrative." I thanked her, hung up, and sat for a while in the quiet. California. The ocean couldn't wash that kind of past away. But she'd try. Of course she would. She always tried to outrun consequences by changing costumes. Let her. That afternoon, Derek stopped by. "I saw it," he said, holding up his phone. "Someone tagged her on Instagram. New business. Coastal interiors. Palm trees and white sofas and a quote about resilience." He handed me the phone. The bio read, "T.J. Harmon, Design. Elegance. Renewal." There was even a post with a throwback photo of the Elmwood house. We all start somewhere. This was mine. No mention of eviction. Of family. Of the man who paid every dime to put her in that house. Just her. Always her. Derek looked at me, unsure. "You okay?" I thought for a second. Then I handed the phone back and poured myself some lemonade. "She can repaint the walls all she wants," I said. "Doesn't mean the foundation changed." He smiled faintly. "Feels like the final chapter, doesn't it?" "No," I said. "This isn't her story anymore. It's ours." That night, I pulled down the old family photo albums. Not the curated ones Tiffany used to build for their coffee table. The real ones. The messy ones. With loose corners and handwritten captions in Maria's script. I found one from Derek's childhood, him standing barefoot in the backyard, arms covered in dirt, grinning like a wolf cub. Maria had written in the corner, "Derek. Age 7. Determined to build something." I stared at it for a long time. Because that's exactly what he was doing now. Building something. Not for her. Not for show. Not with borrowed money or borrowed identity. But for himself. And me? I was right where I wanted to be. In my home. On my land. With no bills I didn't authorize and no voices I didn't invite. It had taken years. But the balance had been restored. And justice? It hadn't come through courts or headlines. It had come through time. And truth. By September, the lake had turned quiet again. That sharp summer glare softened into something easier, something kind. The evenings came sooner. The mornings stayed cool longer. And my house, my little corner of the world, felt like it belonged to someone real again. It's strange, isn't it? How you can spend years feeling like a guest in your own life, until one day, no one else is in the room, and you realize the silence is yours. I started doing small things. Not for survival. Not out of reaction. Just for me. Repainted the back fence. Refinished the old bench by the garden. Hung a bird feeder on the oak tree outside my bedroom window. I didn't expect much to come. But by the second week, a cardinal and 2 finches had made it a habit. And somehow that mattered. Derek called one morning. Said he'd just finished a consultation with a woman who reminded him of me. Not in looks, he said, but in that quiet way people hold pain. Like they're scared if they say it out loud, it'll sound pathetic. She's getting evicted? Trying to stop it. Her daughter used her name to co-sign a house she couldn't afford. The woman didn't understand what she was signing. I sat back in my chair, the sun cutting across the kitchen tiles like gold ribbon. Did you help her? I gave her everything I had. Broke down the terms. Showed her how to request mediation. She cried when she saw it was possible. That's good, I said. No, Dad. That's right. Then he paused. That's what you would have done. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He knew. Later that week, Derek came up to the house. No reason. Just a cooler with sandwiches, a folder of client notes, and a new Bluetooth speaker we used to play old music, Ella, Cash, a little Sinatra, while we sat on the dock watching the sun drift lower in the sky. At one point, he looked over and said something I won't forget. You know, I used to think you were a stubborn old man stuck in his ways. I smirked. Used to? He grinned. Now I think you were right a lot sooner than I was willing to admit. I let the compliment land. No fanfare. Just gratitude. Then he reached into his folder and pulled out a wrinkled piece of paper. Remember this? It was a list. Handwritten. Torn from a yellow legal pad. Elmwood Drive, deed. Mortgage totals. Insurance. Utilities. Credit card charges. Total, $249,600. I stared at it. I found it, he said. Tucked in one of Mom's cookbooks. You must have been tracking it by hand before the spreadsheet. I nodded. Before I decided to burn it all down. You didn't burn it down, he said. You just stopped building it alone. That hit harder than I expected. He folded the paper and handed it to me. You should keep it, he said. Not as a reminder of what she took, but of what you reclaimed. I folded it carefully, slipped it into the inside pocket of my jacket. Later that night, after he left, I stood by the fireplace with a mug of tea and thought about what justice really looks like. It's not courtroom drama. It's not headlines or public shame. It's choice. To walk away. To draw a line. To reclaim your time, your name, your peace. Tiffany was still in California. Her rebrand was floundering, from what I'd heard. Clients were thin. The lifestyle she'd curated no longer fit in the frame of who she was pretending to be. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I had work to do. I had a dock that needed sanding. Tomatoes that needed pruning. A son who called me without needing anything but company. And a life, not fancy, not flawless, but mine. At the edge of my dresser sat the envelope Eloise had sent me months ago. Still sealed. I'd never opened the second one. She'd slipped it to me over coffee and Raleigh said, "For when the dust really settles." It was time. Inside, a single sentence on crisp paper. "When dignity returns, keep the door locked behind it." That night, I slept better than I had in 10 years. And I dreamt of nothing. Because I no longer had to. The house was quiet that morning. Not silent. Not empty. Just content. It's hard to explain if you've never lived alone after a war, because that's what it was, really. Not just a falling out. A war. Cold, subtle, one-sided at first. Then louder. Then final. And now, all that remained was the sound of birds outside the kitchen window, and the smell of coffee just starting to turn warm in the pot. I sat at the table with my mug, same as I had for years, but everything tasted different now. Even the air. Like it belonged to me again. That day, I received a letter. Not from Tiffany. Not from Derek. It was from the buyers of Elmwood Drive. I recognized the return address immediately. I opened it slowly, expecting something transactional, a question about a missing appliance, maybe a complaint. But it was handwritten. A card. Heavy stock. The kind people send when they still believe in dignity. Inside it said, "Mr. Pierce, we wanted to thank you for the home. We know it wasn't just a property. We can feel it in the walls, there's a history here. A family. Not the kind that takes pictures for social media, but the kind that roots into a place. We've started a new garden out back. We planted tomatoes. We thought you'd like that. The Hartleys." I closed the card and set it down gently. Funny how you can sell something and still have it returned to you in another form. That afternoon, I drove into town. Picked up some fresh-cut cedar, new sandpaper, a bottle of wood oil. I decided to refinish the banister on the back deck, something I'd been meaning to do for years but kept putting off because there was always someone else's emergency to tend to. Not anymore. Derek stopped by just before sundown. Brought ribs and a potato salad he claimed he made himself. I didn't believe him, but I didn't press. We ate on the porch, elbows on the railing, watching the water settle into that strange, glassy stillness the lake gets when no one's watching. "You know what I was thinking?" he said, mouth full of cornbread. "What's that?" "I used to think Tiffany was the strong one. The leader. The one with vision." I didn't say anything. He wiped his mouth and looked straight ahead. "But she never led. She pulled. There's a difference." I nodded. "Leaders walk with you. Pullers stand in front and use you like rope." "Exactly." We didn't say much after that. Didn't need to. As he got up to leave, Derek handed me an envelope. I raised an eyebrow. "Another check?" He shook his head. "Just something I needed to give you." I waited until he drove off, then opened it. Inside, a letter. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about inheritance lately. Not money. Not property. The kind of inheritance people don't put in wills. The kind they carry. I realized I don't want Tiffany's kind of legacy. I want yours. The kind that keeps showing up. That says no when it counts. The kind that gives, not to impress, but because it's right. I want to earn that. Not with a check. Not with a promise. But with time. I hope I'm on the right path. Love. Derek. I folded the letter and held it in my hands for a long time. Not because I needed more words, but because I could finally believe the ones in front of me. Later, I put it in the same box where Maria kept old recipes and birthday cards Derek made in kindergarten. It belonged there. Not because it was from the past, but because it was part of the family again. The real family. The one that chose to stay. October came with that soft edge only Carolina knows how to draw, a breeze that smells like wood smoke and old leaves, a sky that turns gold at 4:30, and nights that ask you to slow down, wrap up, sit still. I spent most of those evenings on the back porch. No fires to put out. No court filings. No text message ambushes or credit card disputes. Just the lake, the porch, and a small glass of something decent. Derek came by more often than not. We didn't have a schedule. Didn't need one. He'd knock, come through the screen door, kick off his shoes like he used to when he was 16. One night, I found him already sitting on the dock, legs dangling off the edge, hoodie pulled tight. I sat down beside him, both of us quiet for a stretch. You ever feel like the people you lose still follow you? He asked finally. I didn't look at him. Just nodded. Every day. I dreamt about Mom last night, he said. She was setting the table. Had a pie in her hands. That peach one she used to make from scratch, remember? I remember. She looked at me and said, You found your way home? Then she disappeared. He chuckled, but it cracked halfway through. She never raised her voice, he said. Even when I deserved it. She just had that way of looking at you, disappointed and loving all at once. Your mother had steel in her, I said. She just didn't flash it. She'd be ashamed of what I let happen. No, I said firm. She'd be proud of what you fixed. Big difference. He didn't say anything after that. Just leaned his shoulder lightly into mine, like he used to when he was small and tired. We sat there until the moon climbed out over the trees. A few days later, I got a letter from Eloise. Just a card this time. A pressed leaf tucked inside. A single sentence in ink. You remind me of the kind of man who wins, not because he fights, but because he waits. I smiled. She always had a way of saying a lot without using much. That same afternoon, I got a message from Judy, the real estate agent who sold the Elmwood house. Said the new family had built a garden where Tiffany's boxwoods used to be. They're calling it the Redemption Patch. She laughed. They don't know the story, of course. But it seemed fitting. I didn't reply right away. Just sat there at the kitchen table, thinking about how stories don't end when the villain leaves. They end when the people who stayed behind stop apologizing for surviving. That Sunday, Derek invited me to his place. Cooked dinner again. No fanfare. Just grilled chicken, baked squash, and a salad I'm pretty sure came from a bag, but he'd added pecans, so I gave him full credit. After dinner, we sat on the small balcony overlooking a busy street. Not the lake. Not trees. But it had its own kind of rhythm. Dad, he said, do you think we're ever really done with people? Which people? The ones who tried to undo us. I thought about that for a long second. No, I said. But we are done letting them speak louder than the people who stayed. He nodded. And then he said something that pulled the air right out of my lungs. I'm thinking about starting a foundation. I raised an eyebrow. For men like you, he said. Men who gave everything to their families and ended up left behind. Evicted. Forgotten. We don't talk about that kind of grief. He paused. I want to call it cold return. That one got me. I leaned back in the chair, blinked hard. That's a damn good name, I said. I want to build something that lives longer than my guilt, he said. Something that gives. Like you did. That's when I knew. He was more than my son again. He was becoming the man he'd always been meant to be. And in the reflection of that, I saw who I still was, too. Not broken. Not bitter. Just whole. Thanksgiving came around again. But this time, there were no last-minute insults. No groceries abandoned on the porch. No one standing in the doorway calling me a burden. Just my son, standing in my kitchen, basting a turkey while wearing one of Maria's old aprons and humming to Otis Redding like he'd been doing it for decades. I can't believe you kept this thing, he said, pointing to the apron's faded floral print. She made me promise not to throw it out, I said. Even after it got tomato sauce stains she claimed were permanent blessings. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile you don't fake. The kind that's born from clarity. The table was set for 3. Just the 2 of us, and a third plate, placed at the head of the table, for Maria. We didn't say it out loud. We didn't need to. She was there. In the way the napkins were folded, in the smell of roasted sweet potatoes, in the cornbread stuffing Derek had made from her handwritten recipe card. The one with the smudge of butter in the corner, and her neat, looping, "Double the sage if you love strong women." We sat, ate, laughed. No performance. No curated perfection. No one peeking through the blinds wondering if we were doing it right. We were just there. And that was enough. After dessert, pecan pie from a bakery Derek swore by, we sat on the back porch, the lake quiet as breath. I was thinking, Derek said, rocking gently in Maria's old chair. Maybe next year we invite a few of the guys from the program. The foundation? I asked. Yeah. A couple of them don't have family anymore. And I figured, we've got enough chairs. Enough food. Why not? I sipped my coffee and let that sit in my chest a while. Sounds like tradition, I said. He nodded. Cold return isn't just about starting over. It's about coming back. Even after they count you out. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not the boy I'd raised, but the man who came back on his own terms. The man who had once stood in that hallway, silent while his wife insulted his father, but who had now made a full circle, through shame, through loss, through forgiveness, and was standing again. On his own. Proud of you, I said. He didn't look away this time. I know. The air cooled around us. No wind, just that soft stillness that comes before the stars really take hold of the sky. The lake shimmered, and for a second, it all felt suspended. The money was gone. The house was sold. The woman who tried to break me had vanished into a zip code that didn't know her history. And here I was. 70 years old, gray-haired, tired in the good way, watching my son carry a piece of our story forward. Not the part where I was dismissed. Not the chapter where I was erased. But the part where I came back. Quiet. Steady. Unbothered by the applause I never needed. When he left that night, he turned at the end of the driveway. You coming to town next week? He asked. I've got the first panel talk for the foundation. Community Center near South Tryon. I'll be there, I said. Don't wear anything fancy. I never do. He smiled, got in the truck, and pulled away slow. I stood on the porch, wrapped in Maria's old sweater, listening to the night settle around the house. It wasn't revenge I'd gotten. It wasn't justice in the legal sense. It was something quieter. Deeper. It was self-respect. Earned. Held. Protected. And that, more than any house, any money, any false apology, was the thing I'd been fighting for all along. So if you've listened this far, if you've heard my story and felt something rise in your own chest, I'll just say this. Don't wait to be invited back to the table. Sometimes you build your own. And if you're lucky, the right people will come find their seat beside you. Thanks for walking this journey with me. I'll leave the porch light on. Always. If you found something true in this story, consider subscribing to Manly Revenge. This is the channel where stories like mine don't get buried. I'll see you on the next one.